All right, everyone ready for this? Today, we're gonna dive deep into consciousness research.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It is, it really is. But fascinating too. We're not just looking at like what consciousness is, but what it's actually for.
Okay, getting philosophical?
You bet. And the source material. Let's just say, pack your brain snacks, folks. It's dense.
No kidding. I remember trying to read this paper.
Yeah, this isn't exactly light reading, but hey, that's what we're here for, right? To
Oh,
break it down.
absolutely. Make it digestible.
Exactly. So the paper we're looking at is this scientific paper. It's called Passive Frame Theory, a new synthesis.
Catchy, right.
I know. And they jump right in, which I kind of love. They start by talking about a creature just like hanging out in a cave.
Yeah. It's not your typical science intro, that's for sure.
Totally. And it makes you think, right? Like, what's the most basic experience of just being alive? Whether you're a bat or, I don't know, a cave creature.
Right, they're trying to get at that fundamental level of experience.
Exactly. So how do we even define that? What is consciousness even?
Well, the paper uses a classic definition from philosopher Thomas Nagel. It's something it is like to be that organism.
Okay, that's like deep, but I think I get it.
Right. So think of a bat. It uses echolocation. We can't really imagine what that's like.
Yeah, like sonar? That's gotta be weird.
Totally. But we can grasp the idea that there is something it's like to be a bat.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
And that's what they mean by basic consciousness, that raw feeling of experiencing the world.
So not like deep thoughts or, I don't know, writing poetry.
Not quite. More like the smell of danger,
Ah.
or the feeling of a toothache,
Oh, yeah, I get that.
or like that super strong urge to scratch an itch.
Okay, now that's something we can all relate to.
Exactly, those immediate visceral experiences. That's the focus here.
Gotcha. But here's where things get like really interesting. This paper, they call it passive frame theory.
PFT for sure.
PFT, right. And the idea is consciousness is passive.
Yeah, not exactly what you'd expect, huh?
It kind of blew my mind. Like, it's not the one in control.
It's a radical idea. They're saying all those conscious feelings, urges, what we perceive, it's all just presented.
Presented, like, to who?
Well, think of it like a frame. All that stuff is just there, but it doesn't directly causes our actions.
Hold on. So if my consciousness isn't making me, like, jump when I hear a loud noise, then what is?
Okay, so according to PFT, there are these separate systems in the brain, unconscious ones.
Unconscious. Doing what
They
exactly?
make the decisions about our actions. They're constantly checking the contents of this conscious frame.
Checking it for what?
Relevant info. Think of it like a chef looking in the fridge. The fridge doesn't tell the chef what to cook.
Right. It just shows what's available.
Exactly. It presents the options. And the chef, or in this case the unconscious systems, decide what to do with them.
So my conscious mind is like the fridge full of thoughts and feeling.
I like that. And the unconscious mind is the chef, figuring out the meal plan, so to speak.
Okay, now that's an analogy I can get behind. But then how does, like, voluntary action fit into this?
Ah, great point. The paper's really focusing on actions controlled by skeletal muscles.
Skeletal muscles. So, like, moving my arm, walking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reaching for a cup or running a marathon, that kind of thing.
Okay, but what about things like my heartbeat or digestion? Can't really control those consciously no matter how hard I try.
And that's the point they're making. We have conscious control over skeletal muscles, but not smooth muscle actions.
So, like, internal stuff, my organs doing their thing.
Right. It's all happening on autopilot. The authors use this as evidence that consciousness is specifically for our voluntary action.
Interesting. So my conscious mind might be involved when I decide to go for a run,
Exactly.
but it has no say in how my body digests that energy bar I ate before.
Exactly. Challenges that idea that we're consciously in control of everything, right?
It does. Okay, so now I got to ask about this. They focus on smell of all things.
I know, right? Why olfaction? Why not vision, which seems more obvious?
Yeah, like we usually think of seeing as the big one for consciousness.
Right. But the authors make a case for smell. They say it offers a unique window into consciousness.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. Smell is directly linked to emotions. It can trigger strong responses before we even process what we're smelling.
Like that instant ew when something stinks.
Exactly. Or the feeling of comfort when you smell like baking bread.
Oh, yeah, that's powerful stuff.
Right. It's immediate visceral, much less about spatial awareness like vision is.
Interesting. So less about where something is more about the chemical signal itself.
Exactly. And smell is ancient, evolutionarily speaking, one of the oldest senses.
Like even simple organisms have some form of smell.
Exactly. Makes it relevant for studying consciousness across all sorts of species.
Wow. Okay. So by studying smell, we might learn about the origins of consciousness itself.
That's the idea. It's a whole new avenue of research pushing the boundaries.
Definitely fascinating stuff. But I'm guessing not everyone's convinced by all this.
Oh, of course not.
But
No groundbreaking theory comes without its critics.
what are some of the pushbacks they're getting?
Well, some are skeptical about the whole passive consciousness idea. Like, how does subliminal messages fit into this?
Yeah, can something really bypass consciousness and still affect us?
Right. And what about actions that become automatic? Like I can drive home from work without consciously thinking about every turn.
Does that mean I'm not conscious while driving?
Great questions. And the paper does address these
Okay,
things.
so how do they explain those?
Well, they distinguish between weak subliminal effects and the strong conscious co-activation of actions.
Hmm, not sure I follow that distinction.
So like a fleeting image flashed on a screen, it might influence you later, subconsciously.
But it's not like it's taking over my mind, right?
Exactly. That's a weak subliminal effect. But consciously holding your breath, that's a strong intentional action.
Ah, okay, so different levels of control are at play.
Right. And there's this other thing they talk about, synchrony blindness. Basically, sometimes we're unaware of multiple actions affecting a single outcome.
So, like, my conscious mind only gets the highlight reel, not the full behind-the-scenes action.
Exactly. Think about driving home automatically. You just register arriving, but countless unconscious processes got you there.
Whoa, that's trippy. How much is really conscious control versus these unconscious systems running the show?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It really makes you think about free will, the nature of consciousness itself.
Definitely challenges our assumptions. This passive frame theory is a lot to process.
It is, but it's sparking some really important conversations in consciousness research.
Yeah, I can see why it's making us rethink some fundamental stuff about how our minds work.
And that's just the beginning. There's so much more to unpack here.
We'll buckle up, everyone, because we're just getting started with this deep dive. Okay, so we've kind of established that our conscious minds, maybe they're not as in control as we thought.
Yeah, more like backseat drivers, man.
Right, but this passive frame theory, it goes even further. It says that the things in our consciousness,
The thoughts, the feelings, all that.
yeah, all that stuff, they can't actually influence each other directly.
It's a weird concept, I know.
Yeah.
We think of our thoughts like flowing, right? One to the next.
Yeah, like a river or something.
Exactly. But this theory says each thought, each feeling, it's like its own little island.
Isolated in that conscious frame we talked about.
Exactly. They exist independently.
So wait, my inner monologue, it's just a bunch of separate voices, no real conversation happening?
That's what they're proposing, yeah. That flow of consciousness we experience, the connection between thoughts
It's an illusion.
created by the unconscious mind as it processes all those separate bits of information.
Hold on, hold on. If my thoughts can't actually, like, talk to each other, wouldn't that make my actions random?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets to the core of why they think there's this passive frame.
Okay.
Because if conscious thoughts were always interacting, changing each other, our actions would be unpredictable.
Oh, I see, like, too much going on.
Exactly. Imagine trying to decide what to eat. Every thought about pizza, countered by a thought about salad, and then bam, tacos from last night.
Yeah, that'd be a mental mess for sure.
Total chaos. So having some separation, it might actually help with decision making.
Okay, that makes sense. But then, why are we aware of so much stuff that seems completely irrelevant to action?
You mean like daydreams, memories, random worries?
Yeah, all that mental clutter. If consciousness is for action, why all the extra noise?
It's a puzzle, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And the authors do try to address it. They suggest that this excess of conscious content,
All that extra stuff.
it might actually be an evolutionary advantage.
Wait, how can knowing random things help us survive?
Well, think of it like this. Imagine a bowling alley, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the ball return system.
Okay, yeah, I picture it.
The conveyor belt, it runs constantly, even when there are no bowling balls to return.
Seems kind of wasteful.
It does. But having it always on, it's actually more efficient than having a separate system to, like, detect when a ball needs returning, then activate the belt. It's just simpler.
Oh, I see. Less steps, less complexity.
Right. So maybe consciousness being always on, even if it seems wasteful, is actually a more streamlined solution for the brain.
Okay, that makes sense. But it still doesn't explain why we experience stories, music, art. Like, those aren't about choosing which muscle to move next.
And that's where things get even more interesting. The author suggests those seemingly irrelevant experiences.
You mean like contemplating the meaning of life while doing the dishes?
Exactly. They might be a byproduct of our evolved capacity for complex action.
Hold on, complex action. You're saying writing a symphony is a byproduct of needing to move our bodies?
It's not that direct, of course, but think about all the incredible things humans do. Building tools, social structures, language.
Okay, yeah, we're pretty good at that stuff.
All those activities, they require planning, imagination, understanding cause and effect, stuff that goes way beyond our immediate surroundings.
So you're saying the same brain systems that let us envision the future or analyze the past.
Are also responsible for those random thoughts about what to eat or that song stuck in your head.
It's all connected, like some grand unified theory of the brain.
In a way, yes. And those daydreams, internal monologues, they might not seem related to present action, but they're products of the same systems that let us do complex, goal-oriented things.
So our ability to do art, music, even just think abstractly, it's a bonus feature.
You could say that. An unintended consequence of needing to interact with the world in increasingly complex ways.
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought, but it still feels like something's missing.
What do you mean?
Like those things, art, music, they tap into our emotions, right?
Yeah.
Which are connected to action.
Oh, absolutely. And the authors point that out. Even those irrelevant experiences, like getting lost in a good book, they can trigger emotional systems, which are linked to action.
Like how a scary movie can make you jump, even though you know it's fake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your body reacts as if it were real danger. So even those detached experiences, they're still shaped by our evolutionary history as creatures who act and interact with the world.
So even when we're just enjoying art, contemplating the universe, it's all tied back to our ability to move and make choices.
That's the fascinating implication of this theory. Consciousness, in all its richness, might ultimately be rooted in action.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty big shift in perspective.
It is. Makes you wonder about a lot of things, right?
So let me get this straight. We're saying our ability to like ponder the universe, create art, even have this conversation.
It all comes back to, well, running away from danger.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, yeah.
That's, it's a lot to take in, I gotta say.
It is humbling, isn't it? Think about it. All those amazing things we do.
Yeah, and it all boils down to what? Basic survival instincts.
The need to move, to choose, to react to our environment.
It really makes you appreciate the whole evolutionary journey, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
From those simple beginnings to, well, everything we are now.
Okay, but I gotta be honest. This whole passive consciousness thing, it's still kind of hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah, I get that. It goes against how we usually think about ourselves, right?
Totally. Like, I feel like I'm in control of my thoughts, my actions. But maybe that's just a feeling, not the reality.
It's that gap, right,
Mm.
between how we experience consciousness and what's actually happening in our brains.
Yeah, like, we think we're the driver, but maybe we're just really good at convincing ourselves.
Like we're in the passenger seat, but we've got our hands on an imaginary steering wheel.
Okay, I like that analogy. But then what does that mean for, like, free will, responsibility, if we're not really the ones making the choices?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? The
Yeah.
ones philosophers have been debating forever.
Yeah, and this theory doesn't exactly give us easy answers.
It doesn't. But it does give us a new way to think about those questions. If our conscious mind is more like a display screen, not a control panel.
It makes you wonder, like, how much choice do we really have?
Exactly. It raises questions about agency, about how much we're truly authors of our own actions.
So maybe it's not about whether we have free will or not.
Maybe it's about understanding that interplay between conscious and unconscious and how it all shapes our decisions.
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty complex idea, but it makes sense.
And that's what's so great about this passive frame theory. It challenges us to go beyond that surface level.
To really think differently about consciousness.
Exactly. To acknowledge how much we still don't know.
Well, I gotta say, this whole deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's expanded my own understanding, that's for sure.
I feel like I have more questions now, W, than I did before we started.
That's a good thing. That's how we keep learning, keep exploring.
So for our listeners who are maybe feeling a little mind blown right now, what are some things they can explore further? Where can they go from here?
Well, first off, definitely look up passive frame theory itself. There's a lot of info out there.
Yeah, dive into those research papers, articles, all that.
And then you can branch out. Look into things like olfaction and consciousness, how those connect.
Yeah, that's a weird one, but super interesting.
Totally. And subliminal perception, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
And of course, we got to mention those integrated versus unintegrated actions.
Yeah, that's key to understanding the theory.
So lots to dig into, folks. Don't be afraid to get a little philosophical with it.
That's where the real fun begins. Question everything, keep those minds curious.
And remember, everyone, the journey of discovery, it never really ends.
There's always something new to learn, something new to ponder.
So keep diving deep, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive adventure.